First, we're going to hear from the U.S. Census Bureau, Dr. Ron Jarmin, who's the Deputy Director, who basically runs this organization. They pioneered the development of computer mapping at the Bureau. They pioneered the development of the address coding guide, the dime files, geocoding, and countless other things. Today, the Bureau has one of the largest geographic information systems on the planet, and they're characterized by really high-quality statisticians. Ron is one of those. He holds a PhD in statistics. He ran their research department. That means the Department of Geography there, with GIS, in a digital form, is providing the foundation from field all the way through their entire organizational structure for planning and designing the census. And this is the first time they have ever shared this, so it's a great privilege for me to introduce Ron and his staff. Here he is. Ladies and gentlemen, help welcome this guy. Thank you, Ron, very, very much.
Thanks, Jack.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks again, Jack. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about innovation at the Census Bureau for both the 2020 census and beyond. So, like Jack said, the decennial census that we'll be conducting in just under a year, we're going to start in Tooksik Bay, Alaska, where we'll collect the first enumerations. And I checked the weather this morning. It was 27 degrees in Tooksik Bay, Alaska. It was colder than that here. So maybe we should head up there right now. If you were in Minnesota, I think you would definitely want to head up there right now. But so the decennial census is an enormous operation. Very few things that we do as a society do we try to reach every household and count every person. It's an enormous undertaking that involves a decade of research and testing, and you're going to see some of the benefits of that here shortly. But again, our job is to count everybody once, only once, and in the right place. And doing the census is a huge responsibility and a huge honor for me and the team at the Census Bureau who's doing this. But let me just start with a little side note. Ivan Felige, who used to run Statistics Canada, was asked once, how do you run a successful census? And he said, well, you run it scared. And so I think I'm starting to understand some of that. It's a very complex thing, and there's many challenges that we're going to have to face. So the first thing about doing a census is hard. Like I said, we got to reach every person in the country. We got to visit every household, either virtually or in person. And so there's a number of challenges. Now, many of these challenges are challenges that we faced in the past. Challenges like a very mobile population, challenges like declining response rates to surveys, distrust in government. But some of these challenges are new for the 2020 census. So we're concerned about groups doing disinformation campaigns around the 2020 census, because like Jack said, this is a foundational thing for our democracy. So much like elections, people that want to sort of sow discord in our country might try to mess with the census. So this is a new challenge that we have to face. But how do we go about facing all these challenges? How do we do that? Well, we do it by modernizing the census. So like I said earlier, we spent a good part of this decade researching and testing new methods and new procedures so that we're ready next year to conduct the census. And one of the key things is increased use of technology. So for the first time, the 2020 census will be online. So in 2010, if you remember back to hopefully when you were counted in 2010, you got a paper form in the mail. Hopefully you filled that out and you sent it back in. But if you didn't, someone came and knocked on your door. Well, now you'll be invited to go online and do that. But also you'll have the option of using the phone or, if need be, a paper form. So especially in parts of the country where internet access is difficult. All right, so that's the self-response phase thing. So we've increased the amount of technology. Hopefully that will make it easier for people to respond to the census, get better data and lower cost. But one of the areas where technology is really improving how we're going to do the census is in the field. So the households that don't respond to the survey when we first send it out will be visited by enumerators. And in 2010, those people's work was assigned via paper. They filled out the questionnaire at people's doorsteps on paper. They did all of their travel expenses and hours worked on paper. Today, or in next year, when people go out in the field, they'll have an iPhone. Their work will be assigned to them. They'll be given an optimized route. They'll do all of the survey on the paper and do all of their expenses and hours all on the phone, okay? So we tested this last year in Providence, Rhode Island, and we learned that our enumerators are about 50% more productive than they were in 2010. So with a tight labor market, I have to tell you that's something that gives me some good comfort that we're going to be able to execute the census efficiently. But like Jack mentioned, so geography is at the center of all that we do at the Census Bureau. And we have an amazing team of geographers. They work with state, local, tribal, and federal governments to ensure that the Census Bureau has accurate and up-to-date geospatial information so that we can conduct the mission of the Census Bureau in an efficient and accurate manner. So I'm going to turn things over now to Deirdre Bishop, chief of our geography division, and her team to go over some of the innovations that we've prepared for the 2020 census. So thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and good morning, everyone. Here you can see the key concepts associated with taking a census. Establish where people live, invite them to respond, knock on their doors if they don't, tabulate the data, and share the results. When you're dealing with a diverse nation of over 330 million people living in more than 140 million housing units, the challenge becomes quite complex. We have to count every single person once, only once, and in the right place. The last part of that sentence is critical to the accuracy of the census, and to ensure we get it right, we've incorporated the use of geographic information throughout our design. Back in 2010, we hired 150,000 people to validate the Census Bureau's address list and maps. They walked around every block in the nation, adding, changing, and deleting addresses along the way. 100% of the work was conducted in the field. How are we establishing where to count now? Throughout this decade, we've partnered with organizations that maintain address information. We worked with the United States Postal Service to add over 500,000 new addresses each year. We worked with tribal, state, and local governments to validate over 106 million addresses existing in our database. This decade, we're still conducting a 100% review, but most of the work is occurring in the office. John Policino leads our in-office address canvassing team. He's leading people through an in-office review of all the addresses in the nation, like this.
For the 2020 census, we created in-office address canvassing. We now have around 100 technicians using this system, BARCA, the Block Assessment Research and Classification application, to canvass the entire nation using aerial and satellite imagery, right from their computers. In BARCA, a technician is given a block where they compare imagery from 2009 on the right-hand side to imagery that is right now, current. If you go back and forth, I'm not trying to trick you, it's exactly the same. They then look and see if we have the correct amount of addresses in this block, in this case 36. We have about 36 here. Typically that would be a lot easier because we have structure points that technicians could use, but even though we're all friends here, we're not allowed to share that data. Blocks like this account for 2/3 of the blocks in the nation and can be resolved quickly and easily in the office. It took me a lot longer to talk about this block than it did to actually work it. We can instead focus our resources, perfect, all right, on a block such as this, where in 2009 there was not much going on, but now we see a couple new apartment buildings. We can mark the growth with these pins on the side. We can mark the lack of addresses, and then we can send this block into the field for people to go and find the address data that we're looking for. We also have blocks such as this, where in 2009 there was nothing but forest. We now see a whole new subdivision. And so we can mark it with all these pins for growth, for lack of addresses, and even lack of roads. We have reviewed every single block in the nation, creating a database which we could comb through to find blocks like this, to see if we could go to a state or a local partner to try to find that data and bring it in. So we may not even need to go visit this block. With the in-office address canvassing, what used to take over 2 hours to complete in the field only takes 2 minutes to resolve in the office, creating more efficient and accurate address lists for our census counts and the data you use.
Thank you, John. Now, on to motivating people to respond. Last decade, we invited people to respond using paper questionnaires. We hired 800 partnership specialists to spread the census message. They relied on their personal networks and intimate knowledge of their neighborhoods to conduct outreach and invite people to respond. With a higher initial response rate, we can be more efficient. This decade, we will offer 3 secure options to respond: internet, telephone, and paper. We will make it easy for people to respond anytime and anywhere. We will increase the number of partnership specialists conducting outreach to 1,500. Suzanne McCardle from our Cartographic Services and Mapping team is developing new tools to motivate people to respond. Her team created an interactive mapping tool called Roam to help direct outreach efforts.
As we speak, partnership specialists around the country are using Roam to do 2 basic things. First, they're using its national map of census tracts to locate areas of low predicted self-response. Those are the areas seen in increasingly darker shades on the map. Second, they're using its underlying American Community Survey data to learn more about the people and households in those areas. Roam is making it easier than ever to figure out where and how to conduct our outreach. Let's do a little investigating in the Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas. One of the more obvious barriers to self-response is non-English speaking households. But rather than needing local knowledge, personal knowledge of the areas here, clicking around the map aimlessly, I can use the filter option of the data table. Let's locate all of the census tracts in Prince George's County, Maryland, where more than 1/4 of the residents speak primarily Spanish. Prince George's County, Maryland. Find the Spanish variable here. It's greater than 25. And if I select all of the resulting records in the data table, we can see those areas highlight on the map. If I'm the partnership specialist responsible for this area, the first thing on my to-do list is identify Spanish-speaking groups that serve this community to help share the word of the census. If we change tracks a little bit, we can look and see wealthy areas. You wouldn't typically think of wealthy areas as having low self-response. If we look in Washington, D.C., at census tracts that have median household incomes greater than $90,000, and once we get the results, we'll sort them so that the hardest to count of these areas rises to the top of the data table. We can zoom to the hardest to count census tract. Excuse me, hold on one second here. Got to sort first. We can zoom to the hardest to count census tract in this area, and we can see that it's actually in the highest class of low self-response. 31% of the households in this census tract are likely to not self-respond to the 2020 census. If we scroll through the rest of the pop-up, we can see that 87% of the housing units are renter-occupied, and 39% of the residents didn't even live here last year. One of the most effective ways to encourage self-response in this kind of area, where there are high renter occupancies and recent residencies, is to encourage the internet mode of self-response. No matter why an area is hard to count, our outreach consists of installing our own voices directly in these places and recruiting other trusted messengers to help educate and motivate people to respond as well. However, the Census Bureau doesn't collect all of the local data points that would allow me to pick an establishment to visit within the community. That's where the ability to add open data makes this tool even more useful. For instance, we can add DC's free and open data to the map to see how that can make for even more local analysis. If I add places of worship and libraries and reference that census tract we found a moment ago, we can see that there are 2 centrally located places of worship here. I should meet with the religious leaders of these areas to see if they'd be willing to lend their voice to motivating the community. And additionally, I can choose this nearby library as the site of an educational workshop. If I host this educational workshop during the open period of self-response in 2020, attendees can even fill out their census form online right on site. Using this our transition from using a 40 million cell database to this simple mapping gateway is enabling Census Bureau staff and external partners to make independent, well-informed, data-driven decisions. And they're able to do that without downloading data sets, downloading geospatial data, or downloading specialized software. In fact, even you can access Rome from a web browser on most any device by visiting census.gov/Rome.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next, on to counting the people. A few weeks after Census Day, April 1st of 2020, we expect 60.5% of the housing units will have responded. For the rest, about 60 million, will have to go out and knock on their doors. In 2010, we implemented the largest peacetime mobilization, with over 600,000 field workers to do this job. Every day, carrying heavy bags filled with paper supplies, they met their supervisors at a local restaurant, like McDonald's, to receive their workload and to submit their payroll and expense data. We printed over 17 million paper map sheets to help them navigate, and over 50 million paper questionnaires to capture responses to the census questions. We opened 500 local census offices to manage the workforce and all of the associated paper. Obviously, this was a huge and time-consuming effort. The 2020 census will be entirely new. Anika Adams-Reefer from our platform implementation team is implementing our field operation tools to help follow up, to ask the census questions when we have to visit households that don't respond.
As census takers follow up with non-responders, they will use a mobile device to navigate to the non-responding household and to ask the census questions. For the 2020 census, approximately 350,000 census takers will take to the streets equipped with iPhone 8 mobile devices. Each device will be pre-imaged with the eCase enumeration application that we developed on top of ArcGIS runtime. Before the census takers receive their case assignments for the day, they must submit their work availability for the week. As we can see, this census taker is available to work Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. Behind the scenes, a route optimizer leverages data from industry leaders combined with census-specific criteria to create the optimized case assignment list that you see here. Behind it, just as UPS leverages the road network for the optimized route to deliver packages, Census has created an optimization tool to formulate the ideal ordered list of cases that you see here, using criteria such as where the census taker lives, the language that he speaks, his work availability, in addition to the road network, and the best time of day to visit the non-respondent. So now that the census taker has his list, the first thing that he does is goes to his map, showing the cases assigned to him in this area, indicated by the blue pins. The map allows him to be geographically aware of his current location in relation to his case's location, in relation to his current location, in relation to where his cases are, and the application is navigation enabled if he needs help in getting to the address. In reviewing his cases, if he sees a pin with a number in it, this represents a multi-unit address, like an apartment building. Now let's talk about the icons at the bottom of the corner of the screen. The bottom icon shows the census taker his current location. The top icon shows him where his cases are located in relation to where he's standing right now. And the middle icon takes him back to his original view. If he happens to be in an area with poor or no cell coverage, that's not a problem because the vector tile maps reside locally on the device. Once the census taker arrives at their first case, she will launch a survey, knock on the door, and begin the interview. Now you're probably wondering, how can we be sure that she's actually in the front of the door of the house and not conducting the survey from, let's say, inside Dunkin' Donuts? Well, the application is aware of her current location and will alert her and the Census Bureau if it calculates that she's too far away from the location of the case. This is just another benefit of this application to ensure that our census takers are knocking on the right door at the right time. She completes the interview, and the case moves to the inactive list. Throughout the day, their completed cases will sync back to the server if there's a connection. Otherwise, they will sync once they have connectivity and transmit the data back to Census headquarters. The information is fed back into the optimizer each night to make the next day's assignment, and the process repeats daily. Tracking weekly hours and miles no longer requires a separate meeting with the supervisor and reams of paper. At the end of their day, they will submit their hours worked, miles used, and any expenses incurred using this time and expense function. So as you can see, Census is modernizing field staff workflows by making every step in the process mobile-enabled with easy-to-use and intuitive applications. The benefits are faster data collection and submission, reduced use of paper, eliminating the need for daily meetings with a supervisor, reducing the number of census takers needed by 1/3, and reducing the number of local census offices by 50%.
Thank you, Anika. As you can tell from our excitement and passion, we believe in the value of the census. Since 1790, it has been the foundation of our government and of our democracy. Suzanne, John, and Anika have just showcased a few ways in which we've incorporated the use of geographic information into a census designed for the 21st century. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Deirdre and team. So wasn't that awesome? So one more round of applause for the. All right. So it's folks like this that make me feel comfortable that we're ready for the census. So thank you. So we will wrap up the 2020 census when we start disseminating the data that we collect, and that's going to start in December of 2020 when we send the apportionment counts to the president. And these are the data, the state population counts that are used to determine how many seats in the House of Representatives each state receives. And then the following spring, we'll release the redistricting data to the states, and these are the files that folks use to redraw congressional and state legislative boundaries. So these important constitutional and statutory uses of the census. And then after that, we'll start releasing the other data products from the census as well. I just want to point out, Dunkin' Donuts sounds really good right now, actually. I just want to point out that I think there's a few Census Bureau data users in the crowd, and that the decennial census is only part of the story at the Census Bureau, and that we only do the decennial once a decade. It only has a small number of questions on it, but most of the data that people use comes from all of the other data collection platforms that we have, whether that be the American Community Survey, which used to be the long form of the census, surveys like the SIP, business surveys like the Economic Census, or administrative database, things like the county business patterns, or our economic indicators that provide timely monthly and quarterly information on the performance of the economy. And these products are, I think, what the majority of our data users use, and something that we want to apply all of the innovations and tools that we've innovated with the 2020 census to these things. So, and one of the areas I think we need to really concentrate innovation in is how we deliver the data to our users. And so a lot of you all are probably relatively expert users, and you might have used things like American Fact Finder or pulled data off of an API at the Census Bureau, and you know what you're looking for, and you have a customer, someone who wants to make a decision, and they talk to you, and you're able to glean the kernel of information they need, and you know how to go out and find it. What we want to do is to be able to move the data closer to the decision maker. And so we're innovating how we produce or release the data to the public with a project that we call SEDSci. I just kind of say that. You can look for that later, but also some other tools. So one of the ways that we want to do this is we notice that very few decision makers need information from a particular survey. Okay. So they might want to know something about income. Well, we collect income on the ACS and the SIP and the CPS. Well, which version of income do they want to use? So they want data information that's actionable that they can make decisions on. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to build digital tools that have a particular user context in mind and bring all of the data that's relative to that type of decision maker into one place. And Census Business Builder is an excellent example of that. So this is designed for entrepreneurs and small business people who want to start and grow a business, and provides the Census Bureau data assets in an easy-to-use Esri mapping platform to let them query the data and make decisions. And so this has data from the American Community Survey, from the Economic Census, from county business patterns. It can add layers in from other data sources. And this is the kind of information that a small business owner can query to learn about their customers, about their suppliers, and about their competitors in a way that allows them to make smart decisions. So one of the interesting aspects of a product like this is you talk to a small business person, they say, this is great, awesome, thank you for doing this, but I need data that are more timely and more granular than what's available from traditional Census Bureau data products. And so this is another focus of innovation for the Census Bureau going forward is how do we get access to new digital source data that's out there as a consequence of digital transactions in the economy, from sensors, from what have you, that we can bring to bear in products like this. And also, how do we do privacy protection in a way that allows us to do more granular protection of the data to allow users to be able to drill down to very local areas or very detailed industry or demographic characteristics. So as we think about products like the Census Business Builder, how do we sort of take this to scale? How do we work with data users to provide rich contextual information that is actionable for decision makers without a lot of sort of expert middlemen between the data and the decision maker? And the Opportunity Project is a way that we're trying to address this issue at the Census Bureau. So what we do with the Opportunity Project is we bring a set of data users who have a particular problem, maybe like some community development people or someone who's interested in providing programs to veterans. And we bring them in, we sit them down with data subject matter experts who know the data that's relevant to their issue, and with developers who use user-centered design principles to build digital tools that bring the data to the decision maker. So we've done this with dozens of different projects. I think we have a demo day coming up that was rescheduled after the partial government shutdown, but that's coming up. So look for things from the Opportunity Project as a way to bring the data to the decision makers. So I just want to wrap up with one last thing, is first to say thank you, and then in a little more than a year from now when we send you a postcard, please respond to the 2020 census. Thank you very much.